Right. Good morning, everyone. Looks like I've got Connie and Janet on. Anyone else? Good morning, you guys. Are you there?
Yes, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Um, Small crowd. I think there was supposed to be about a dozen people joining in, so maybe they'll join in once we get going. But wanted to thank you guys for signing up, for participating. Hopefully, this will be an informative session for you. And obviously, given that it's a bit more of an intimate group today, if we want to make it a little bit more interactive, we can do that as well. So I just wanted to thank everybody for if you participated in the first round of training. Thanks for participating in that, and again, thanks for signing up and participating in this round. I think this is going to be a really interesting round of training. I've got 4 training sessions lined up over the next 4 weeks, and I think it's going to be a really much more interactive and engaging way to learn how to, build a better business. Because at the end of the day, that's what this is all about. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that everybody could see that. All right. Put this down here. Bang. All right. So just want to confirm you guys can all see my screen right now.
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, great. So basically, as I said, this is the second round of training, and the first round really focused on, building the foundation, building the infrastructure, if you will, within the database to enable all of the things that we're going to be talking about as we move forward in this training series. Um, now we're moving from whereas the first round was really more about organization. Now we're going to be starting to move towards engagement. We want to take the infrastructure that we established in the database in the first round of training, and now be able to leverage that information and make it more effective. So before we get deep into today's conversation, I want to remind everyone, the handful of us that are on the call here. I just want to remind you that, the bigger purpose behind this series of trainings, it's not to make us experts in technology. It's not to make us Rechat experts, right? The goal is to make us help us, is what I should say. The goal is to really help us build a more sustainable, predictable, and thriving business. And you do that by implementing habits, systems, processes along the way. And that the technology that we are, leveraging here is just one of the tools in that journey building this more sustainable and thriving real estate business. So I want to continue to reinforce that message because I think sometimes the trainings get sort of interpreted as, oh, we're just going to learn about, some new feature, some new, capability in Rechat. And that's not the case at all. So like to always start out the goal of why we're doing these trainings. And again, just to thank all of you for taking an active part in your business and thanking you to invest the time that you're doing here to help you build a more sustainable and thriving business. So, with that, today's topic is about building a marketing campaign. And why does this matter? Why does any of this matter, right? And so when you think about, leads and prospects and everything, Most leads and prospects, and in particular buyer leads we're going to be focusing on today, they don't just disappear because they just decided not to buy. Most leads don't convert because we somehow captured that lead. We did a good thing by capturing that lead, but then we don't really do anything with it. It either just sits in our database or, we don't have any real consistent follow-up with that lead. And as we all know in this industry, if you're not staying top of mind, you know, leads are going to go and engage with the first person that happens to be there when they're ready to go. So it's so important to have a process in place, to have a system in place that continually um, allows you to engage with that lead or that prospect. And when we talk about specifically campaigns, campaigns are is the way that we can do that. It gives us a reason to reconnect with our prospects. And it does that in a way that provides information that is timely, that is useful and relevant to them. And I'm gonna spend a lot of time talking about the importance of, relevant information. And, I think a lot of people um, feel that, oh, I'll remember all of these things. I can remember to follow up with this person. I'll put a note in my calendar or something like that. And sometimes that works. But, without a true structured plan, without a true structured campaign, more likely than not, prospects just become more names in the database. They're scattered names instead of visible opportunities, instead of a visible audience that we continue to engage with. And, I will, make a little bit of a plug for Rechat right here. That is the purpose. And frankly, it's not just Rechat. I mean, any good system will, enable this for you, right? It helps you identify that right audience. It helps you to um, segment your database. So you're delivering relevant information and not just generic messaging, right? And in a good database set up well, like Rechat, um, it can help you. It can prompt you. It can make sure that you're following up with the people that you need to follow up with when you need to follow up with them. And it helps you to, track the engagement that you have with these people. So again, it's not technology for technology's sake. It's a business enabler, and it helps you build those repeatable systems and processes that allow your business to grow and thrive. And at the end of the day, the goal is really simple. It's to turn active leads and prospects into meaningful conversations, and in turn, those conversations into appointments and ultimately business. So one of the things that I really want to stress, and there'll be a number of things that I stress throughout the training, but one of the things I really want to stress is when you're thinking about how do I really begin to engage with my audience in a more intentional way, campaigns is the way to do that. But the most important thing is when you're thinking about a campaign, you want to start with the outcome. You want to start with understanding what do I want this campaign to accomplish? If you think about like a roadmap, right? Maybe you're taking a trip and you know the only way you're going to get to your destination is to know where that destination is before you ever jump in the car and start driving, right? I love to use analogies. That's a great analogy, right? I mean, fair enough. Some people do just like, hey, let me hop in the car and just drive and see where the road takes me. Okay. But the reality is, you want to know where your destination is before you even start. With a campaign, you want to know what that outcome is going to be before you ever sit down and start drafting an email or start picking a template for an email. And so that's what we're going to focus on today. And for the purposes of illustrating that, we're going to be using an example campaign where we're going to be talking about an active buyer prospect that exists, or buyer prospects, I should say, that exists in your database. And we're going to be structuring a campaign around creating conversations and ultimately appointments with this audience. And by doing that, by understanding the outcome at the beginning, you're going to be able to better identify and better predict what those desired outcomes are going to be. Whether that be, you want them to be replying and responding to your emails. Maybe, part of the campaign outcome is that you want them to be requesting more information about a property or scheduling, a buyer consultation, right? So you just want to have that definition in advance. You want to know what it is that you're going to be doing. Because, as you're building the campaign, as you're building, the various emails or the messages that'll be going out as part of this campaign, the goal, the outcome is simply not to generate an open or a click on the email. The goal is always going to be to create meaningful and intentional conversations. So, how do you begin this process, right? First of all, you kind of know what your outcome is. You're defining your outcome. The next thing is you want to begin with the audience, right? And when you talk about an audience, it's not going to be everybody in your database. We're going to be focusing on buyers specifically here. You're not going to create a campaign for every single buyer in your database. It's just going to be very ineffective. And so when you start thinking about this, who are you really trying to reach? And so one of the ways you can start thinking about this is, you know, what is the certain criteria that I want to be looking at? How do I want to be beginning to segment my audience or define the audience that I want to communicate with? Maybe it's people who've recently been inquiring about a property, or maybe they've attended an open house. You can have a whole segment in your database of people who've, recently attended open houses. Or, maybe it's somebody that you are segmenting by location or time frame, or price range. So it's important to really begin to think about that audience. Who is that audience? And then, start to put some definition around that audience. So for example, like if you didn't go through the tagging training that I did a few weeks ago. I believe it's recorded. I would encourage you to go back and take a look at that. That was really, I think, one of the more fundamental pieces of getting your database organized. And that's one of the more fundamental pieces that enables all of what we're talking about today to really, work. So, you've got your segment in there. It's an active lead or prospect who's a buyer. In this case, we're going to segment them by location, right? We're going to just be targeting buyers for this specific campaign. We're just going to be targeting buyers who are looking in Northeast Santa Rosa. Now, obviously, you can make that location relevant to wherever you are, right? But in this case, we're going to just say we're going to not look at every buyer, but just buyers who are looking in Northeast Santa Rosa who have expressed an interest in purchasing within the next 6 to 12 months, and that who have recently either inquired about properties, attended an open house, or who are getting, current listing alert activities, who are engaging with listing alert activities. So hopefully you can see you're beginning to sort of define that audience, and you're beginning to put some criteria around that audience. Because the more clearly that you can define your audience, the more relevant you can craft the message that will resonate with that audience. So is you're thinking about your audience, right? You're thinking about your database. And again, let's stick with buyers for this example. Ask yourself, you know, who are the buyers that I want to be targeting? Who's that audience of buyers that I want to be communicating with? What do I know about them? And this is where having notes and history about those contacts in your database is very important. I think it was one of the last trainings that we did. We went through a buyer journey, and I walked you through, how a buyer might come into your database and what kind of information you should be collecting from that buyer as soon as possible, so that you get more context around what it is that you know about them. What are they looking for? What's important to them? Also looking about what stage they're currently in their home buying journey. Are they at the very beginning? Maybe it's more of a early nurturing stage, or are they somebody, that is ready to go and their time frame is in that 6 to 12 month time frame? Um, and then this is the next two pieces I think are one of the most important things to really think about. What message is going to resonate with them? What message can you provide that is going to be relevant to them at the stage of the journey that they're in, knowing what you know about them? So that's a really critical part of this exercise, right? And then, most importantly, and probably the most important part is, what do you want them to do once they get that message from you? What action do you want them to take? Because it's not enough just to send out great information. You're going to send out you've put a lot of thought, you've put a lot of intent behind your message, and you're going to send out this information, and it's going to be wonderful information, but you haven't asked your audience to do anything with it, right? They're going to say, wow, hey, Tim, thanks for sending this great information, right? And there you go. You really need to think about what action you want them to take. So, a useful campaign starts with the specific audience and not a blank template. I'll go back to that again. It's easy, and trust me, I am as guilty as the next person. Sometimes I'll be scrolling through these templates. Oh, this template looks really nice. Maybe I could use this template. Rachel's laughing at me. Maybe I could use this template and create a message using this template. The absolute wrong approach. All right. We talked a little bit, I just mentioned a little bit about the message. The message needs to be relevant. Relevance creates the engagement that we're looking for, right? And really it comes down to this simple question. Why should why should your audience pay attention? Why does this matter to them right now? Right? Giving them information about something that may have happened, 6 months ago, or is a new development that you just heard about that is going to be starting, in a year, when their time frame is in the next, 6 months, may not be really relevant to them right now. Great information, but is that really relevant to them right now? So when you think about a relevant message, some of the possible topics could include sort of some new inventory in their target market, right? In this case, we're looking at Northeast Santa Rosa. Maybe there's some new inventory that came on the market in Northeast Santa Rosa that you want to, make them aware of. Um, you know, Most people probably have their pulse on interest rates right now, but maybe they don't. You never know. So maybe you've got some really relevant information for them. You know that maybe they may be more sensitive to interest rates. Maybe you've got some relevant information for them about, a recent interest rate adjustment, or you became aware of some new financing program that could make their home buying more affordable for them. Um, Recently reduced properties is another one. So as you think about this, think about what would the relevant message be that I want to send. And as I said earlier, it really needs to connect to their current situation. So it's really important that you understand where they are, what is going on with them in their current situation. And more importantly, and I'll reiterate this a couple more times, don't just simply make the message about you. I see a lot of emails come through, and you hear it said all the time, oh, just send out to your database. Oh, just listed and just solds, right? Well, my database maybe isn't interested in, a just sold. I've got a buyer database and they're going to just say, you sending me all this information about properties you just sold. Well, again, that's nice. Good for you. So what? Why does this matter to me? Why is this relevant to me? So, there's a time and place for promoting yourself, just listed, just sold, those are good social media things that you can do. But when you're thinking about this in the context of a campaign, maybe you do have a listing that a new listing that you just got that may be very relevant to a segment of your database. In that case, it would be very appropriate and very relevant to send that kind of information. But simply just to kind of promote yourself and promote your business, not really the point of these campaigns. And so, now we get a little bit more into the details of what does an actual framework look like? What does the campaign framework look like? And every effective campaign includes these three elements. And if you take nothing else away from this training today, remember this: three elements. Audience, who are we going to be communicating with? Who specifically do I want to be communicating with? Value. What useful information, perspective, or opportunity are you going to be providing to them? And why is that relevant to them? And three, action. What do you want the recipient to do once they receive this information? So the three, building blocks, the three components of an effective campaign: audience, value, and action. And as you start to create and craft this campaign, oh, thought that was me. As you start to create this campaign, use that framework right there. Audience engaged in working our example here. Who's our audience? Engaged prospective buyers focused on Northeast Santa Rosa. What is the value that you're going to tell them? What is the value you're going to deliver to them? The message. You've got a hand-picked briefing of new listings, and recent price cuts, recent price reductions in their target market area. And that the action is that you want them to respond to you, you want them to give you a call so that you can have an opportunity to discuss these new updates with them, because it could be beneficial for them. So that's the framework that you need to kind of think about and structure your campaign around. One of the most important things too is have one clear message. We all have a tendency, I think, to want to, provide our clients with so much valuable information, what we feel and what we deem is valuable information, right? We want to give them everything because we want them to just, have everything that we could possibly give them. We have so much valuable information. We just want to give it all to you. The most effective campaigns typically will have one central message and one primary call to action. If you start giving them a bunch of stuff, hey, I just wanted to let you know about some new listings in Northeast Santa Rosa. Oh, by the way, there's also going to be some open houses this weekend. And oh, I heard about this rate reduction. And oh, by the way, I always appreciate it. If you can, referrals are always appreciated. You're just bundling everything, including the kitchen sink, into this message. And what happens? Your message becomes diluted. Everything just sort of begins to neutralize everything else. and it becomes confusing for your audience. They don't know exactly what it is you're trying to tell them. You're telling me a bunch of stuff. Maybe it's related, maybe it's not related. I don't know. It's just all confusing. So therefore, I'm just going to tune you out. Don't do it. Have one very clear message and one clear call to action because that clarity, believe it or not, makes it easier for your audience. It makes it easier for the reader of your message. I mean, think about it yourself. I mean, if you get, think about the things that you get, either mailings or emails, and there's these lengthy emails that go on and talk about a million different things, and you're like scratching your head. First of all, if you even get through the bottom of it, you'll be lucky. But then you're scratching your head. What was this all about? Why did I get this? What am I supposed to do with this? Keep it simple. Keep it simple. One message, one action. And so again, kind of continuing to build on this campaign example, right? You want to send a very simple message to this audience. And as you've segmented your database, right? Maybe you got like, I'm going to just pick a number. Maybe you got like 500 buyers in your database. But because you've segmented your audience, because you know exactly who your audience is that you want to be communicating to, you've got like 25 really solid audience members for this. People in your database who are active looking in Santa Rosa, right? And so you want to let them know that there's some new opportunities coming up, or you want to make sure that their home search hasn't changed. So your audience is going to be, your prospective buyers. Your subject in the email may be, has your home search changed? Why is this an effective subject for your email? One, because it just naturally invites curiosity. Someone's going to look at this. Has my home search changed? What? I don't think so. Let me read on, right? So, you want to do something that's going to, make it compelling for them. And by also giving them, that cue, you're inviting them to be able to reevaluate where they are as well, right? And so that'll be important too, because you're giving them the permission to say, "Hey, has my search changed? Has anything changed with me? Has anything changed in my situation?" And then, again, a very specific call to action. So here's what a sample message might look like. Again, this is just an example. May not even be in your own tone, your own language, but it's just giving you an example. Hey, buyer X, the market is continuing to shift, and there may be some new opportunities available that you haven't maybe may have overlooked, or maybe weren't part of your original search. That's a really important one. Maybe weren't part of your original search. How often do we work with buyers who tell us exactly what they want? They know exactly what they want. And then we go show them homes, which is completely opposite of what they told us that they wanted, right? So if you are picking up on these cues, if you're updating your notes, and if you're continually building the information that you're gathering from these people, you might be seeing homes out there that weren't part of their original search, but might start resonating with them. So that's an interesting little, 3 words right there, or 2 words right there that could really prompt some engagement, right? And then if your timing, location, or priors have changed, this might be a good time to revisit these things. Again, this by giving them this information, by saying this, you are giving them permission to reevaluate their own objectives, their own goals. And that's always a good thing. I think people constantly are doing that. And so you're giving them that opportunity, and you're inviting them to think about that and to discuss that with you. And so, then what's the call to action? Reply to this email, let me know what has changed, or, schedule a time for us to update your home search. So again, might not be the exact words that you use, but it's a very clear call to action. Reply to this email. Let me know what's changed. Schedule a time for us to talk about this stuff. Keep it simple, make it easy for them to engage and respond with you. So, as a little sort of tool that you could use, here's a little planning worksheet, campaign planning worksheet. Um, and so as you're beginning to think through these things, you should be able to answer all five of these before, sending out this campaign. So, one, who is the audience? Who is my target audience for this campaign? What is the goal that I want to achieve through this campaign? What is the information or the value that I'm going to be providing to my audience? And what is that one main message that I want to deliver? What is this campaign going to be telling them? And most importantly, what is the action that I want them to take when they receive this information? So you should be able to answer all five of these questions before designing and certainly before sending out any campaigns. And so, if this is new to you, if you haven't done something like this before, one, I invite you to just, be open to the idea. And if you feel like, I don't know how I would even start doing this, I would encourage you, if you're not using AI, um, to give that a try. I use it every single day in all aspects of my business. And, within Rechat, we have Lucy integrated right into Rechat. And you could simply, go to Lucy, and there's multiple ways that you can get to her. We're not actually going to go into Rechat today. This is the first time that we haven't done that because really this is a foundational training. But you can just go into Lucy and say, "Hey, Lucy, I want to create a marketing campaign and I need some help structuring, putting this campaign together. I've never done something like this before. Can you help me walk through the steps I need to do? I need to answer these five questions. Can you help me do that?" And I guarantee you that she's going to come back with some pretty amazing responses. And so if you feel stuck, I would recommend, reaching out to her. Or if you are using AI, another platform, another technology platform, you know, that's a great place to start as well. But use this as the guide, either for yourself or if you're, leveraging AI. And then I just want to, just highlight some common mistakes. We've touched on these, earlier in the session here. But one, things to try to avoid these things, right? Sending a campaign out to your entire database. Don't do it. It's gonna dilute your message. It's not going to be effective, and you're more likely than not going to have a number of people unsubscribing or putting you in their spam folder because it's not relevant to them, right? Um, don't start with a template before defining your goal. Again, we have all these templates in Rechat, and if you haven't been in the Marketing Center and looked at all of the different templates, the email templates, newsletter templates, so on and so forth, social templates, um, they're all there. And in the next session, we're going to actually talk about creating a branded template, which I do a lot of in Rechat. So, but I create the branded template after I know what it is that I want to say. So don't start with the template first. And please don't just put out some generic message that could apply to anyone. Because once again, your audience is going to receive this and say, well, why am I getting this email? Why are they sending this information to me, right? This doesn't mean anything to me. I talked about including too much information. Avoid that. Edit down as much as possible. And when you think you've got it down, edit it one more time. Again, using several different calls to action. Don't do that. Give them one message and one call to action. Make it very simple for your audience. Um, and again, don't make the message about you. This is not a you campaign. This is a them campaign. This is something that you're doing to benefit them, to provide an opportunity or value to them, your audience. Make it about them. And this is a really important one. if you end up putting this together and you're building something, a campaign in Rechat, whether it be a simple email or whether it's some sort of more marketing collateral type of material, please check it first before sending it out. You can send yourself a preview email. You can make sure, especially if you're embedding links in there, or if you're putting video, or, if you're getting, if you're just building it out, make sure that everything works. Make sure that the spacing looks right, because it comes through differently on mobile versus desktop, and you have the ability to see how it's going to look on both platforms, right? Send it out to yourself first, do a preview, make sure it's all correct before you send it to your audience. And then lastly, failing to follow up with people who engage. So you've put all of this work in, right? You've gone through, you've defined your audience, you've defined your message, you know what your outcome is, you've even given them a call to action. And guess what? They took that action and you never did anything with them. That is a huge thing and a huge mistake, and you want to avoid that. So the campaign really is just the beginning. And I just sort of, it's a great segue, that last thing to avoid. It's a great segue because the campaign is just the beginning, right? The campaign is really creating that opportunity for you to have a conversation with that prospect, right? So you want to be monitoring that campaign. You want to be actively managing that campaign that you've just spent, you know, a lot of time and effort and intent building, right? So you want to be reviewing when somebody's opening and engaging with that campaign. You want to be watching if they're replying to you. And then you want to make sure that you're personally following up with those people who are engaging. Because as it said, the campaign creates the opportunity for you to have the conversation. You have to follow up with them to actually make that conversation happen. Right. And as it goes on, as you have those conversations, make sure that you're updating that information so that you can continue to refine what's going to be an important campaign. And at times, your campaign may end up, narrowing down to just one or two individuals, and that is totally fine. Um, you know, these marketing campaigns don't have to be out to these big, broad audiences. Sometimes it can just be, even just one prospect. But if you've got a thoughtful, intentional campaign, that prospect will move all along that flow continuum to ultimately, doing business with you. And, you want to continue to refine, as I just said, the more you learn, the more you engage, the more that campaign becomes effective at what its intended outcome is. You want to continue to refine all those future campaigns to dial it in even further. And so, I used to be in the first round, I would do the training because we were doing the trainings on Monday. So midweek, as a reminder, I would send out this is your weekly one quick win. Um, we've kind of shifted the things around a little bit. So I'm just going to incorporate these into the training for this week. So this is your one quick win. So go through your database, think about an outcome, right? That you want to do. Maybe it's re-engaging some stale leads, or engaging with some active buyers, or engaging with my recent open house attendees. Whatever that is, you know, come up with your outcome, define your audience, go through your database and start trying to define who that audience is. Clarify, as I said, clarify what the campaign goal is, and then write one focus message. And this is really just an exercise that you can go through, but if you want to implement it, you've got the resources now to do that. But write that one focus message and define what that call to action is. And if nothing more, this one quick win is just an exercise to get you going. You don't have to develop a whole campaign and send a campaign out. But like all of these sessions that we've had up to this point, it's starting you on the journey of creating the process, creating that repeatable behavior in your business so that, as time goes on and you do this more and more, coming up with campaigns for sellers or, whatever the case may be, it'll be a much more effective process if you start doing it now. And again, it's not, doing these campaigns, it's not simply for the sake of sending out marketing emails and saying, oh, I send a bunch of emails. I engage my database all the time. I send all kinds of emails out to my database. That's not the intent. The intent is that you want to do something that is going to be engaging those prospects, that is going to make that prospect raise their hand and say, yes, I like what you're doing. I like the information that you're giving me. It's important, it's relevant, it's valuable to me. I want to raise my hand and work with you. That's the intent of what we're trying to do here. So, I've talked about this multiple times throughout the session, but the takeaway that I'd love you to go away with today is, you know, the successful marketing campaign doesn't start with the technology. It's not about the technology, right? It begins with you understanding who your audience is. Who are you trying to reach? What do they need to know? And why is that message going to resonate with them? And then most importantly, what do you want them to do next? Um, I've said it 5 different times, 5 different ways throughout this, 45-minute session. Hopefully this message is sinking in. And hopefully you can see the value in investing the time to think through these campaigns and build these campaigns. That's why successful real estate businesses succeed because they have these campaigns dialed in. They're consistently and constantly reaching out to their audiences, not all giving them the same message. They're giving different segments of their database the messages that are appropriate for them and relevant to them, therefore building that know, like, and trust factor in their audience and ultimately driving business. So hopefully this was informative for you. Hopefully you got something out of it. Um, Happy to take any questions that we have right now. Anyone? Let me stop sharing my screen here. No questions? Wow. Okay. All right. Well, listen, thanks again. I appreciate you spending the time here. We will do
Tim, this is
another.
Jamie Sundstrom, and I actually do want to ask you about building a campaign for W agents to let them know, like that I'm on the Mendocino Sonoma coast.
Uh-huh.
Um, I don't know every W agent, but is that something that I could put into this to Rechat to let them know? I know right now the market is such that people are willing to drive out here, but as it cycles, and it will, they're not going to have time to drive out here. And I want people to know that I'm here and what areas I service. So
Mm-hmm.
would I put that into Rechat and make that a
Sure.
look for a referral via that?
That's a great campaign, Jamie. So you're already defined. So again, you're defining your audience, right? So your audience is W. Where do I find that recording? I'll, I'll I think Connie, I'll get to your question in just a second. So, great first step here, Jamie. So you're defining your audience right away. Your audience is, hey, W real estate agents. You're my audience, right? What is the objective? What is the goal, right? So as you're thinking through this, I think you got a great, sort of idea and concept here. So I would run with it. I mean, I would build this out, right? What is the goal that you want from this campaign, right? So think through that. And then what would be the relevant message that you want us to know about, right?
Yeah. That
Right.
that's kind of like what would I put that into AI and kind of work that through?
Sure. Yeah. So think about you can tell Lucy right there in Rechat, or if you work on another platform like ChatGPT or Gemini or any of the other ones, Claude, just say, hey, I want to build a marketing campaign. This is going to be for I work with W Real Estate. I'm an agent at W Real Estate. This is going to be a marketing campaign targeted towards, W Real Estate agents, and I want them to be aware of, that I'm here, that I focus on this market area, and that I'm a resource for them. Again, think through what would what would make you're an agent. What would make you what would a relevant message be for you if another agent was reaching out and say, "Hey, I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Jamie Sundstrom. I'm up here on the Mendocino coast. Just wanted to let you know I'm here." Nope.
No.
No. So think about why this would be beneficial for us. Right off the bat, hey, I'm a referral agent for you. You have a referral, here's a referral pipeline for you. You can build your business on the Mendocino coast, or, something along those.
Okay.
Why is it going to be valuable to us to know that? But I think that's a great marketing campaign, Jamie.
All right.
And you can do
So
that right through
so
WeChat. And
right
you
through
can,
Rechat, even though they're not technically quote buyer or seller,
no,
it's a referral. It's a referral that I'm looking for, referral partnerships.
right. That's a great campaign. And you
Okay.
can just and your audience is W Real Estate. And then and when you send it out through WeChat, you can just select your audience as all W Real Estate agents. That's a very easy one to do. You don't
What
even
if
have to
I
go
don't
into your database. You don't
have
even have to go into your database. It's already there.
it's okay, that's what I was going to say. How do I get, because there's a lot of us. And so that was my other question, was like, how do I get connected with them? But just use that tool right in Rechat. Just send it right out.
Yeah. And Jamie, do you have an office administrator that you work with?
No, that would be myself and Chat GPT.
Uh,
So
um,
I reach out to Olivia.
Yeah, so if you reach out to Olivia, Olivia can help you, like, send out the email, because basically when you get ready to send the email, it'll say who to, and all you have to do is select W agents, and it goes out to all W agents.
Okay,
Yep.
right on. Then I'm gonna work on that because I really want to learn the system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see. Connie, you said missed the first session about the database setup. Where do I find that recording? Um, I believe the recordings are. I'll have to check with Haley. I don't know exactly where the recordings are archived, but I know that she was sending out a follow-up emails after the training, with a link to the recording. So I may have that email, and I can forward that over to you, or Haley. I'll ask Haley where they actually reside. Okay. All right. Anything else? All right. Well, again, thank you, everybody. I appreciate the time. As I said, this is a 4-part series, and so we'll go on to part 2 next Thursday. Hope to see you then. All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.